Slugfest Survival Week 5 matches were Slugfest and what was the first BYE-MAGEDDON of the 2024 Fantasy Major League Rugby season. On this week's episode of the Fantasy Ruckers Show, we break down the Week 5 that was, look at some waiver wire candidates, and look ahead to an exciting Week 6 filled with good matches. And of course, we also go over the latest news and notes and tell you how you can get your first taste of Fantasy MLR. The Fantasy Ruckers Show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode number 102 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much to our Fantasy Ruckers League members, our community members, and everyone else tagging along on this journey of making fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. And we just got through it, Maddie. We got through BYE-MAGEDDON with you every single week. Ryan Yee, Matt Yee here on the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Did you survive, Maddie? You're away last week. You didn't. You weren't really in there with the preparation of me and Vandy last episode.
I was preparing. All the good work goes on in the dark, so you guys don't even know. But no, it was tough. I mean, combined bye week with just random lineups of guys you expected to start to not be starting. Just crazy, but we're on the other side. We all got a loss,
except for me, baby, coming out with the win here.
It's hard to tell when you're down in 7th place.
Oh my god,
because a win doesn't even matter.
All right, it's the season's still early. I know that Rugby Wrap Up commented on our last YouTube video that it's a long season, and I agree. It's a long season.
Look,
I still got time.
For him, it's been a long season since what, March? Beginning of March, last week of February.
That's true.
I drafted Dan Hollinshead with his first round pick and expected it to not be a long season.
Well, nonetheless,
that's bravery.
Nonetheless, though, we did have a fun episode without you here on the show, Maddie. Vandy and I were talking. It was a little bit fun there on episode 101 last week to kind of have some one-on-one time and not necessarily, have your big mouth here on the show stirring up a storm as you always do.
I do, yes. Well, I'm glad you guys got some 101 time.
Well, we said that you had to take a little sabbatical after a tough loss last week. It was a tough week for all of us last one. But hey, I turned the ship around. You guys are still figuring it out. But did your
sabbatical? I did not take a sabbatical. I was celebrating the 100 episodes, which I thought we were all doing, but the other ones didn't get the memo. They decided to celebrate together.
Did our executives approve that on the business trip?
No, it was actually self-run. It was self-led.
Okay,
so
we just didn't get the invite.
Yeah, well, the company here really encourages initiative.
Is that
ownership?
So? Is that so?
Courage, and I took the courage to take the ownership and the initiative to go on a celebration trip.
Okay, well, I guess Vandy and I's celebration was having you not on episode 101, but nonetheless,
I can show you guys some of the company values.
To each his own. But hey, we did miss you last episode, Maddie. So good to have you back from the Pacific Northwest.
And by the way, you are not back full. You are 7th place, Ryan. Let's get this right, okay?
Out of 10, we're slowly moving up.
That's pretty rough.
I was 9th not too long ago, but hey, it's slowly but surely making our way up. But nonetheless,
I think all 3 of us are in a row. But yeah, go on.
It's we got a jam-packed episode here on this episode 102 to continue that journey of trying to make it back to the top here and help some of our Fantasy Ruckers League members get back to the top as well. Here we got obviously our week 5 breakdown of our BYE-MAGEDDON that had, like you mentioned, Maddie, just kind of an interesting kind of lineup decisions. BYE-MAGEDDON on top of that. It was a tough one to get through, but we made it through. Like you said, we're on the other side. So we're going to break down those 4 matches that happened over the weekend, hand out some Team of the Week honorees, the prestigious award. I think it's right up there with the Nobel Peace Prize, right? I'm pretty sure. Close. Get in there.
We'll get there.
We also got the waiver wire segment. This one's, I think, going to be an important one here because obviously people getting through BYE-MAGEDDON. There were some important pickups last week, some important drops as well. So we're going to name some names here that maybe you need to keep a lookout for. And then, of course, look ahead to our week 6 preview. But as you probably have noticed if you're listening on the pod, or you may have noticed viewing on our YouTube video here, we do not have and are not blessed with the appearance of Devin Vandy Vanderpool here on our show. We're sadly missing him, but we want to just get a little bit on the serious note here. Vandy dealing with some family stuff. His grandpa was admitted to the hospital there, dealing with some medical complications. So Vandy had to message our group chat and just say, hey, got to tend to some family stuff. And we found out too that his grandpa, his name is Dan, is a big fan of the show. And he tunes in on our YouTube video, watching you, Vandy, myself break down a little bit about fantasy MLR and the thing that is Major League Rugby. And he's been absolutely loving it. So we wanted to give him a shout out. Wanted to give Vandy a shout out here. All the best wishes. Hope a speedy and quick and good recovery for Dan. And also best wishes to Vandy as well as they kind of go through what is a challenging time here with some family stuff. So just wanted to make sure we're obviously a big family here at the Fantasy Ruckers, whether you're any of our hosts, a part of our community, a league member, in our Discord, any of that, we always have each other's backs here. So we just wanted to give a big shout out to one of our community members, Dan, who also happens to be Vandy's grandpa, who is battling through, tough guy, getting through everything there. So just wanted to give a shout out there.
You got this, Grandpa Dano. You're a legend.
Absolutely. All right. And then before we get into it, if you aren't already, make sure you're following us on socials. Join that community because we are a loving bunch. We have each other's backs here at the Fantasy Ruckers, Twitter, Instagram, or I should say X, Instagram, Facebook. Also give us a like, subscribe for your weekly dose of fantasy MLR, the Fantasy Ruckers on YouTube. Approaching on 100 subscribers here. So let's get that number up.
Go.
We're almost there and appreciate
Lots
all the
of going
support.
another celebration.
Yeah. Appreciate all the support that we've been getting from the people here. And if that's all, again, not enough for you, join our Discord community. They have nice game day chats in there, talking about the exciting week, talking about the build-up, talking about the lineups, everything that's going down, fantasy MLR related, Major League Rugby related. It's all there. And hey, make sure you give the fantasyruckers.com a quick look too. Obviously, that's our main platform for where our fantasy MLR site is held. But even if you're a numbers junkie, want to learn more and dive deeper into the world that is Major League Rugby, the fantasyruckers.com will be a great place to start there. Big shout out to Alistair Kirschpool, the mega mind behind the new revamped website heading into this year, which has been absolutely stellar so far, 5 weeks into this 2024 Major League Rugby season.
Yeah, it's been good. You're going to be tagging along.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's hop right into it, Matt. Like we said, jam-packed episode here, so we got to move things right along. Let's start into some signings that we need to catch up on when it comes to. It has been a while to the world of MLR and how that's going to relate to a fantasy MLR. The first one that I am going to talk about is Wilton Rabolo, a familiar name, signing with Rugby Football Club Los Angeles through the 2026 season. So a nice 3-year contract for him. It looks like the 28-year-old front row position is coming to LA for this mission around here. Obviously familiar name there on the New York Ironworkers when he played in 15 matches, starting 5 of those in 2022 and 13 matches in 2021. It's good to see a familiar face return back to the MLR.
It sure is. And this will be a nice signing, I think. Will be a nice little support or potentially, I mean, he's a Brazilian international, right? So we'll see how he goes. I think he will be definitely fantasy relevant. It's just a matter of how RFC LA looks by the time he gets there. How I guess he plays and what's going on there. So I think he'll be fantasy relevant. I think he'll be good.
Hasn't made an appearance yet for LA. LA obviously coming off the bye here.
And this is what, 3 weeks ago?
This was about 2 weeks ago that this had happened. A little over 2 weeks. So obviously pretty quick turnaround for that first match that LA played by next week. We'll see when LA's lineup comes out this week, having some time to get reacquainted with the MLR and now acquainted with his new teammates in LA. It'll be interesting to see where Rabolo Bolo ends up in that Los Angeles lineup. Another signing that we want to touch on here, announced last week, Tamiwa Agbongbon. Did I say that correctly? Is that good?
Well, I don't know about that one.
That's pretty close.
I mean, I don't know what's right and what's wrong. So.
Well, the back rower is returning and re-signing with Houston for the rest of the 2024 MLR season. He appeared off of the bench last season for the Houston SaberCats, has experience with the Leicester Tigers, with Lowborough Students RFC overseas as well. And he did make an appearance this past match for the Houston SaberCats, off the bench, scoring 2.4 fantasy points. Again, that back row room is pretty deep there for the Houston SaberCats, so I don't know how fantasy relevant this is going to be. Maybe a streamer, during a BYE-MAGEDDON week like this, but again, adding more depth to that Houston SaberCats back row room.
Yep. And, I last year when he came on, I don't think he made that much impact fantasy-wise, but who knows? Might be different, but like you said, right, pretty tough competition there.
And again, anything can happen too. I mean, there's injuries that happen. We'll get into the situation with Old Glory DC, which leads to some waiver wire stuff that we're going to talk about how back row rooms can quickly change even when you do have depth. So again, names to keep an eye out for, because if something does happen that is unfortunate for a team, it wouldn't be surprising if you see guys that are kind of those bench guys making a big name for themselves in the world of fantasy MLR, which we'll get to some names coming up here. Another big one that we got to mention, and it's kind of the same ideology when it comes to the Fantasy Ruckers in molding the North American fantasy landscape with our overseas rugby sport here. Kind of a meld. Obviously, we've adapted the fantasy football rules into this fantasy MLR scene that we do here in Fantasy Ruckers, and in real life, it seems to be that clash as well when it comes to a big time players. We talked about this earlier in the off season about this guy, and Louis Zamet is made an NFL team. He made the shocking announcement, shifting off the Wales international team, and saying, "Hey, I'm going to go achieve a dream that I've long had in playing American football." And he goes and does that, has a combine, does okay, pretty solid numbers, and at least it's good enough to get himself at least a practice squad contract with the Kansas City Chiefs. And it's funny, I wish we had Vandy here, because he's the in-house Kansas City Chiefs fan. It'd be interesting to see. We'll have to get his take on it next episode. But Louis Zamet is a Kansas City Chief. What do you think about that, Maddie?
Well, good for him. You would have thought it would have been a Waikato Chief, but hey, it is what it is. Nice to see him in North America, along with the rest of his overseas friends in the MLR.
Absolutely. And he's listed as a running back. I was asked this question when I appeared on Happy Hour with Bill Baker and John Fitzpatrick of Rugby Morning and Eagles Overseas. And they thought what my opinion was on this, whether or not he's going to break a lineup here. I can't see him. I mean, he's listed as a running back. I mean, running backs are sort of like, maybe as a special teams player, I was reading about that he might have some impact there. He might have that ability to kind of read the field and kind of carve out some lines. But with the new kickoff rules, it might be interesting, or maybe it heightens his value there. But it is cool to see a rugby player actually make an NFL practice squad, and we'll see whether or not he can take the next jump.
Yeah. Well, it wouldn't be the first time. We did see Christian Wade, and
that's true.
It's a whole big thing, and it just turns into nothing. But moving on back to the MLR, a few signings here in addition to yours, Ryan. Nick Feeks going back to the NOLA Gold. Good for him. I think they need a little bit of depth in the back three, anyways. So it should be good. They have him coming back. Ed Fido will be back, or is back. Actually, very loudly is back.
Yeah.
And San Diego, I think we missed this one, Ryan, but San Diego signed another Patty Ryan.
Yeah.
I believe he's a back row, not a front row like the other Patty Ryan, but the Patty Ryans could potentially be Patty and Ryan side by side.
It's true. And it's funny because there were people in our Discord when we have a signing announcement channel, and someone had posted the Patty Ryan signing for San Diego, and the instant reaction to that was there are too many Patty Ryans,
Yes.
let alone on the San Diego Legion, let alone in the Major League Rugby scene as a whole. So it's pretty interesting. I actually got mixed up texting Alistair and was like, hey, can we get Patty Ryan added to the database front row for San Diego? He's like, wait, this is the back row Patty Ryan. I'm like, yes, him.
Yep.
That's what I meant.
Yep, exactly. But hey, more Patty Ryans the merrier.
Absolutely. And again, none really. We'll keep an eye out on these guys, but again, nothing big fantasy impact wise that I see kind of.
Yeah, I mean, keep an eye on Patty Ryan. Nick Feeks, we've always seen him have games. He might be a streamer, but other than that, yeah, I'd have to agree.
Yeah, and then Matt, you have one final note before we move on
yes.
in the show
Apparently,
here.
See this on Reddit. Maybe I got April Fooled. Who knows? We'll find out. But Will Hooley apparently on his podcast, maybe he was April Fool and everybody, but apparently on their podcast, the Rugby Rundown with Alex Corbisiero on Rugby Network, they were teasing, or Hooley was teasing at the fact that more Anthem players are coming, which I would wonder, is that loan players from other squads where they realize the young guys aren't getting any minutes? Is this overseas Americans? I don't know. It would be interesting to find out. But yeah, maybe we'll see the Anthem with some new faces halfway through the year.
I guess we'll find out. And again, we'll break down that game. Anthem kind of, they're doing okay. I mean, the record might not reflect that, but hey, from at least a fantasy perspective, there is some value to be had there, which we'll get into. And then maybe there'll be some more players coming into the mix. All right. Well, that wraps up our news and notes segment. Again, some signings to catch up on, some fun NFL, MLR kind of crossover there. And again, just some names to look out for here when it comes to the coming weeks in the world of fantasy MLR. But let's talk a little bit more about league-related stuff here in a Commissioner Yee's League Update.
Oh, no.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. All right, hear ye, hear ye. Here is Supreme Commissioner Yee with your Fantasy Ruckers League update. And yeah, like we do every single week, we break down the latest that is in the world of the Fantasy Ruckers. 5 different leagues that we have this year, and the first time that we've opened it up to the public. It's been a blast. 5 weeks in. Love to see how much people are having fun with this. And something that is a big part of that, if you weren't able to join a league, has been our weekly challenge. And it's a way for you to kind of dip your toes in the world of fantasy MLR, get a taste of it, get used to the scoring. And again, the way it works, all on our social media pages, but you pick 5 guys at 5 different positions. You have a salary of $15. You've seen these kind of social media posts where you pick your best lineup out of a selection of guys. It's basically like that. And you try to maximize your $15 here. And hey, in this week's weekly challenge, BYE-MAGEDDON, harder to make your lineup. Would you agree, Matt? It was tough for me, just with the lack of guys.
At the halfback position.
Absolutely. And
I
just
basically had to spend 5.
Yeah, it was tough. There's definitely not many options. You had to get a little bit creative. And the people who got the most creative, I'll give you our top 5 for week 5. Rugby Mornings, John Fitzpatrick finishing in first by a pretty wide margin with an 80-point performance by the 5 guys he chose. Stephen Lowen, our community moderator of Slow and Steady, it comes in second, now 11th on the season, 64.3 points. DB Rugby 03, I believe his name is Matt. He's the commissioner of one of our leagues. He finishes third with 58.5. Fourth is Old Prop with 54.2. And to round it all up, number 5, Grand Vizier CA with 52.3 points. So a whole season rankings, Fitzy with the big time 80-point performance pushes himself all the way to second, passes you, Maddie, who you finished 13th this past year. You're now this past week. You're now third on the season with a total of 252.5. But guess who's still in first, baby? 272.2 fantasy points. 12th on the week, first overall, though. Come on. The commissioner showing up. All right. In the game that he created.
There's a lot of noise coming from 8th place over there.
But see, this is a whole different animal, Matt. I'm only talking about weekly challenge, man.
Hey, it's all around. You got to be all around.
People don't need to know that I created both of them. Doing well in one, not so hot in the other. But nonetheless, weekly challenge, a lot of fun. Get involved in it. The link to sign up there is on our social media pages. Links are in our bio. get a taste of Fantasy MLR. It's a whole bunch of fun.
Yes, please.
You can dip your toes in it and get ready to join in our 2025 full-fledged fantasy season. And then moving on to what we like to do every single episode is give a shout out. A nice little shout out to our top performers when it comes to our full fantasy leagues and the amount of points that they are racking up. And last week, Vandy and I spoke about it, Maddie. We had our very first, I think, or not our very first, but our best performances by a wide margin. I think we had over 5 different league members surpassing triple-digit fantasy points last week, which was incredible.
I'm starting to think that I mean, they have 8 guys, so they have better players.
That's true.
So they're scoring more points.
But
so now I'm less impressed. I was just thinking about, as we were talking about it before the show, I looked at it, I was like, I'm not impressed anymore.
But in fairness, last week we had over 5. This week we only have 3. So, I mean, just the fact that there were that many points scored by some of our fantasy league members, it's pretty crazy. But nonetheless, to each his own. To each his own. I got to give a shout out to this week's top 5 performers. The highest point total scored in the Ruck this league with 117.7 fantasy points. I've read.
Doing that on
I've read. I know it's crazy. I've read.
Have you seen his team? What's his team?
Let's pull up his team. Her team actually. Let's pull up her team. It is T. Loban in the Ruck this league with 117.7 fantasy points. Pulling up the team right now. They went with, all right, highest point score, Oscar Collar at fly half. Had Von Isaacs in the flex position. Damian Hoyland.
All right.
In the back 3.
Don't even need to go
Devon Rousseau at the center position. Reichert Hadding with 15 at the flex forward. Johan Mumsen, and then Pita Ane Asu in the front row. So her.
All right. I don't want to hear any more. I don't want to hear any more of these teams. Let's just get to it.
Her team is pretty sweet, but 117.7 fantasy points. I've read in their league channel that people are getting scared of her team there, and I would be too with the names on that list. Rugby Morning Fitzpatrick not only cleaning up in the weekly challenge, but also is a second top performer here in this week 5, 104.3 in the Fantasy Ruckers League. Kudos to him. Scary Larry Rugby of the Tryhards League getting 103.1 fantasy points. Chicago Carnivores in 4th with 92.6 points. The commissioner of the Lou Malnati's Deep Dish League, and then Stephen Lowen. Also appearing in the top weekly challenge, finishing at the top there in 2nd place, and also doing well in the league as well. 91.9 fantasy points for Steven.
Nice. Good for you, Steven. Maybe try doing that in the main league too.
All right. Well, I mean, the 91.9 was in the main league, and he did get a victory this week. So,
Cool. Well, I guess I can't say much. Jokes. I am still not ahead of him. He's in 1st.
Yeah. So we'll see here. Nonetheless, fun week of week 5. Congrats to the performance of this week. And hey, let's get right into a breakdown, Maddie, and talk about the players that we just mentioned. Some of them will be in that team of the week honoree list in that T. Loban's team there that we'll definitely talk about. But I guess to open it up just generically here, I mean, it was a slugfest of a weekend, right? Only 4 matches, and I mean, there were back and forth games. None of them were really necessarily complete blowouts. At least there was at least an aspect of the game. It wasn't like the Chicago-Utah game that we had our first ever watch party. All of them were quite exciting.
We should have done our watch party this weekend.
We should have done our watch party this weekend, but it was fun.
All of them, even games that seemed like they weren't going to be that great, ended up being like, you had to watch the 80th minute because, the scores changed in the last 10. So it was a really fun weekend of BYE-MAGEDDON Rugby. It was 8 teams put on, I think, the best show that they could possibly put on this weekend.
And again, Utah, Los Angeles, New England, and New Orleans was all on bye. So only had those 4 matches this week. Before we get into it, Matt, you want to say a quick thing? You have something to get off your chest when it comes to TMO?
Well, look, I got a lot of things. Also, first of all, they took two water breaks this weekend. I had to watch Sam Gala and Nate Oxberger, and I forget who it is, but doing dips on an Arctic cooler twice in a row in the span of a minute. They came back from the water break, said, all right, we're going to go to water break, and went back to the same commercial. You got other commercials. I promise you do. I've seen them. Anyways, that was pretty pretty awful, Ryan. I think even by your standards.
Yeah, it's true.
Although I would like to say, I think we're going to get better. Look, we're going to get better, but if we want to continue to attract North American fans, we got to speed up the game. Okay? We can't go to TMO to check every dang little post whistle scuff up or whatever. They can't check every dang thing. The TMO also does not need to chime in and tell every thought that he has. Let the ref the game, and the ref's got to kind of let the game go. And look, when the ball's available at the scrum, just let it go. We don't need a scrum penalty every time somebody scrums against Carolina. Okay? Is it Carolina? Carolina.
Yeah.
All right. So anyways, back to the TMO. I would love to see the TMO being used a little bit less. The ref relying a little bit more on his game. Use the TMO for big decisions. I do not care whether Dylan Fawcett grazed the nose of a player. Didn't actually happen. Like, that scenario didn't happen, but that is literally what they're TMOing. They are TMOing. The TMO is saying, hey, have a chat with this number. I don't care about a chat. Have a chat. The ref needs to see it to have a chat. Yeah. Okay. If you're going to tell the ref to pull out a card, then you tell him to do that. But don't make me listen to 3 minutes of the TMO to hear you at the end say, oh, actually, I can't see anything. Just have a chat with the captain because I don't know the number. Okay.
Did you get off that off your
it's
chest?
Been building. I've been waiting for BYE-MAGEDDON because I know that we have less to talk about with the games, and less games to talk about. So I have a little bit more venting period, and the fact that they threw in the double water break means that the league knew.
I mean, in fairness, there is a balance that needs to be found, and they are still learning at that point. But you're right, though. There has to be obviously some responsibility from the ref, and for him to kind of call the game and control that flow of the game. You don't want it getting held up too much. Yeah. So again,
but also it's not just the refs. It's not just the ref. TMO, Derek Summers specifically, or Chris Asmus also when he's on TMO, when you are not reffing. Do not try and ref. You are a match official. You are an assistant. Yes, but you are an assistant to the main referee. You are not trying to ref the game from a replay booth.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Anyways,
you feel good?
That's that. Yeah, that felt better.
Okay, good.
Now we can get into the games.
All right, well, let's get into the games here. Houston SaberCats taking on the Dallas Jackals. Dallas at home on the Friday night matchup, and it ended up being a pretty exciting one. I mean, back and forth. The Jackals falling in this one 30-27. Houston stays perfect. Dallas falling to 2-3. I think we can both agree, Matt, a lot closer than what we thought it was going to be. It got scary there for a bit at the start with the Houston SaberCats, and then clawing through. I was watching this match at the end. I mean, Dallas had every single opportunity to come away with a victory here. A couple silly penalties that led also to the game-winning kick by Davy Coates. Yep. I got the line out at the end there where they kind of muffed it. There's some questionable call on that one as well, but nonetheless, a mistake there, leading to the Houston SaberCats getting the victory here. But they had every single opportunity to come away with the victory at home here, just falling short here. And if you're going to beat good teams like Houston, you gotta not make those mistakes.
Yeah, they should have won. I mean, they were like 2 Martin Elias conversions away from winning.
Yeah.
I mean, 1 technically, I guess, but yeah, like they should have won that game. Houston got lucky with the conversions. But I thought we saw some really good things. I think Dallas is starting to understand that, hey, we need to start utilizing our centers more, which is nice to see. I think that's really good for guys like Winchester, for Tidwells, for the Marcel Mullers of the world.
Richardson looked good.
Yep, that as well. And you know what, Houston, they don't look as dominant as they did in the past few weeks. And I'm going to say that primarily from the pack. I mean, this is a pack that we looked at and said, wow, these guys are going to run the league and they're going to be the best pack in the league. But they did not look good against his Dallas side. But they're continuing to do Houston things. They scored off, I think, twice of quick ball inside the 22 to the forwards. They're just going forwards, essentially just rolling it quickly, which can break down defenses inside the 22. And they did a really good job of that. Guys I liked out of this, right? Vaughn Isaacs from Dallas. Love him. He looks better and better every time he plays. Martin Elias got hurt. He might be slotting back into 10, so we'll see. I really like the newly capped Toy Fua. The 8-man. he looks like a hard runner. He can definitely surely break tackles, and they're using him quite a bit. And on the Houston side, I was a big fan of Emmanuel Albert without the 2 tries.
Yeah, well, let's dish out some Team of the Week honorees there, Matt. You mentioned one of them, Sam Tufua, 19.9 fantasy points on the season. He is our back row player on the Team of the Week. 164 meters gained, a try assist in the just under 70 minutes played in his first appearance of the season. He looks pretty solid. We're going to talk about him more coming up in our waiver wire segment. But Tufua looks good, Matt. You touched on it. Von Isaacs, 18.5 fantasy points for him. Again, looking pretty electric there. 80 meters gained, a try assist, and 5 tackles as well. A lot of double-digit fantasy point scores. That's what you're going to get with these back-and-forth affairs. Is just like a lot of points to be had. And these are the fantasy or the matches that you want to have fantasy assets a part of, because you're just going to see a whole bunch of points here. 16.7 fantasy points for Emmanuel Albert. Marcel Muller, 15.9 fantasy points there with a try that he scored. Pita Ane Asu, who I think is going to be one of the front row steals of the year. Another full 80 minutes played with 18 tackles, a try. He's really taking advantage. Out of all the kind of the front row guys, he's a guy that's really popping off for me. Makeen Alicom of the Dallas Jackals, 14.6 for him. Looked okay. 46 meters gained, 15 tackles, which is good to see in his very first start of the season. And then Davy Coates, 13.8 fantasy points. And I want to mention Davy Coates last here because I want to go into the conversation before we shift on to the next game about what Houston is doing here with their lineup. Because obviously there was some concern, and Vandy and I talked about in the previous week when it was the Houston versus Seattle Seawolves game, which you could argue was their biggest match up to the point here in the 2024 season, and they go with AJ Alatimu at 10, put Davy Coates at the 15, and you know, there were some questions on, is this something that we're going to see? This is their biggest match of the year. I was saying, okay, maybe temper expectations because maybe they wanted AJ Alatimu to get the start against his former team, which is kind of a poetic justice, which might be a part of the case as well. AJ Alatimu doesn't even appear in the lineup. Max Schumacher is kind of there as that kind of back guy that can fill in. What are your thoughts on kind of how Houston is moving forward here? And is Davy Coates at 10 their best lineup moving forward, and is AJ Alatimu a part of that?
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's not just the 10 position for them. When you look at Houston, you have to look at the 10, the centers, and the 15 position, because those are heavily impacted positions here. And I'm going to start, we'll get to the Davy Coates or AJ Alatimu last, but I'm going to start the centers. I mean, you look at their Tual Tassi, Dom Makina, you also got Sam Hill, you also got Lourdes Vanderskiff. So there's that depth there. When you look at 15, you got Drew Wild, you got Max Schumacher, who they obviously didn't loan to Anthem, so they expect him to play. So they got Wild, Schumacher. We've seen Kutzer play there. Now you go to the 10, you got Alatimu, Kutzer, and I think also Max Schumacher. All three of them can play at the 10 position. It's tough. It's tough having so much depth. The nice thing for Houston is they have so many options that they can go with. I don't think Drew Wild at 15 is their best Davy Kutzer at 15 is their best option. Drew Wild at 15 is going to be their best option. They just need to understand what type of game they want to play. So if they're looking to try and play something more controlled, more managed, then having AJ Alatimu in Seattle. And I think, honestly, AJ Alatimu against Seattle was probably perfect. You keep him back, you manage the game, and he understands kind of what parts of the field they need to be in and how to get there in order to win the game. Davy Kutzer is going to be that explosive guy. If you're looking for that type of game plan, that's the guy you're going to want to have in. Unfortunately for fantasy managers, lots of depth means you got to have it all because they could be playing at any time and they could be starting at any time. Sam Hill and randomly will start one week. Tualatasi will start the other. You just never know.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that's where the consensus is for me, and where now I'm myself as a Davy Coates owner is a little bit more comfortable seeing that it wasn't just an outright move to the fullback position. Now that was their strong lineup moving forward. AJ Alatimu at 10, Davy Coates at 15. But there is, I think, still the level of concern that now Coates is not going to be starting every single week because of that
Very
depth.
true.
So I think as a fantasy manager, how I'm approaching this is that if you're a Davy Coates owner out there, you just need to make sure you have a fly half on your roster that you have ready to plug and play if and when Davy Coates is not at that fly half position taking kicks? Because we saw it at the end of the Seattle game. When AJ Alatimu and Davy Coates are both in the game, AJ is the one that is going to be taking those kicks. So it's going to be tough to have a guy at your fly half position that's not kicking and losing out on those points. So just have a backup plan in place. I think that hurts his value in terms of draft capital. If you picked him in that second round like I did, I don't think Coates is going to give you back that second round value. Now, he had a good performance this past week, like we mentioned, but again, it's going to be that averaging out, that he's just not going to be in the lineup every single week, or he's going to be playing at a position you didn't expect him to, and he's not going to be able to have that ceiling to get you those points that you expected someone that you drafted with your second pick to get.
Let me take a wild prediction of this before we move on to the next game. AJ Alatimu will play against all the very well defensively sound teams, the New England Free Jacks, the Seattle Seawolves of the world, potentially San Diego Legion. Although I think they already played together and Davy Kutzer played. So soon, Free Jacks, Seattle Seawolves. AJ Alatimu will start. For the games that need a little bit more opening up, they have a little bit of opportunity to really open up their attack. Davy Kutzer should be in at 10. You saw that with Dallas. You've seen that in the past. So I'm thinking maybe that might be it, which is a good sign for Kutzer because you only play Seattle and New England 4 times in a year.
Yeah, so we'll see. All right, so team of the week honorees again: Peter Ane-Asu at the front row position, Sam Tuifua at the back row position, who we'll talk about more coming up in the waiver wire segment in just a bit. 30-27 victory for the Houston SaberCats over the Dallas Jackals. All right, switching over to the Saturday matchups. We have the Chicago Hounds at home taking on the Seattle Seawolves. The Seawolves come out on top 34-26, push themselves to 4-1, second place now in the West, 1-3-1 for the Chicago Hounds. But Billy Meeks starting at the center position for the first time all season. The 10 experiment at least did not occur here in this week 5, which was helpful for this BYE-MAGEDDON. And I think obviously 1-3-1 is not the record that we were predicting with the Chicago Hounds heading into the season, but there is some optimism heading in after this matchup that happened in week 5, because Chicago, they took it to the Seattle Seawolves and made it a lot closer, at least than I thought it was going to be. They started off fast. What were they? They were up like 19-0 at some point, right? And then Seattle kind of took over from that point. But there were spurts of what we thought the Chicago Hounds team was going to look like. They just couldn't get it done against the top tier team, or one of the top tier teams in the league.
Yeah, I mean, the score doesn't really tell the story. The fact that Chicago put up 26 points is maybe impressive enough, but as a Chicago fan, that's probably not enough. And they were up, and it was their game in that first half. Seattle, they never really had the ball, and when they did, they just seemed to want to make mistakes. But once you got to kind of the late first half, the second half, Seattle just decided that, hey, all right, if you're going to make a mistake, I know that we're making mistakes, but the minute that you make a mistake, we're going to capitalize it. We're going to score. And that's what they did. They would just capitalize on mistakes, and that's how they won the game. I thought Chicago, they're a bit slow in the red zone. They saw the benefits of having Meeks at 12. I think they got the ball out wider a lot more, a lot more expansive. I think they should never put Cardi at 15, though. I think Carl's was essentially made useless at 10 outside of tackles, so he's too good of a player to be locked up in the 10 position.
So that's my question, right? Because I think that's what we were gonna to lead into this before we get into kind of the team of the week honorees and fantasy performances. I'm calling it the Cardi Price phenomenon. Okay, that's what we're calling it here. And my question to you, Maddie,
who's Price?
Is the Cardi price, like the price of Cardi. Yeah, the price of Cardi of him being at your 15. So the Cardi price phenomenon, right? I'm coining that term. No pun intended. Would you rather have Meeks at the center position, but have to start Cardi at 15 and Carl's at 10? Because right now, I think that's the struggle right now with the Chicago team. Their deficiency is obviously having an adequate fly half right now that they can kind of just plug and play there. Or is this Chicago team better with Meeks at the fly half position, having Carl's back at the 15, and then now being able to play with that kind of 12 position? For me, then that's why I'm calling it the Cardi price phenomenon, is because having Cardi at 15 is worth the price of having Meeks at 12, which is going to make your offense better. It's not ideal, but at least in those two worlds, I would 100%, especially how they looked after this match against Seattle. It just, like you said, they can move it out further, and we're going to get into one of the players that was the biggest benefactor of that here in Chicago. But I mean, I would rather have that situation there for sure.
Great phenomenon, but like they don't have to make that decision. They also have plenty of decisions. So
what's your ideal lineup then for Chicago here then moving forward?
Look, you have Cardi, Billy Meeks, O'Keefe, Augsburger, Dominguez, Carls.
So you
right
feel
there on paper, that looks like one of the best lineups in the MLR.
So you feel, and I think that's where the question is, and I think there's a lot of kind of people with polarizing opinions on Luke Cardi. You're more comfortable with having Cardi at 10 than you are at 15.
Yeah, but there's a difference between putting a 10 out there where you're asking him to do everything. Cardi doesn't need to do everything. We've seen Billy Meeks have the ability to be a distributor. He is both a ball carrier, which he's shown in the past, and a distributor, which he is very much shown in his career. So you don't need Cardi to do everything. I understand that he's not the best option. Honestly, there's really no polarizing conversation surrounding that. It's understanding that, hey, he is probably the worst fly half in the league. And what you have to ask him to do is be exactly that and don't ask anything more. And he doesn't need to be more with that back line around him.
Yeah. So I guess we'll see. But
he can be as translucent as Carl's was.
Yeah.
And all Carl's did was make 12 tackles.
It's fair. And Carl's has looked electric at the fullback position when he's given that opportunity, and his ability to counterattack with his kicking is pretty stellar. So we'll see.
You see it there. You see glimpses of it. I know we're going on about this quite a bit, but like you see glimpses of it where Carlos gets his grubber blocked because simply he just isn't used to playing that tight and not having that much space.
Right.
It's it's just I would put Cardi needs to be like 15. You need Carlos to have space. Cardi, he can live without space. Like he doesn't need it. Actually, don't give it to him.
Just get the ball, pass the ball. Get the ball, pass the ball. That's all that needs to happen. So I guess we'll see. We'll see how the Chicago Hounds management kind of approaches their lineup moving forward. But that was definitely one of the things that I wanted to discuss here. One of the storylines heading into this week and obviously coming out of the week as well. From the Seattle Seawolves perspective, a little bit more optimistic with this team, obviously falling short against the SaberCats the week before in what was the match of the year, which we talked about last week in episode 101. But they bounced back here 4-1 and now back second in the West again. You're still confident with the Seattle Seawolves team before we get into kind of team of the week honorees?
Yeah, very confident with the Seattle team. I think they still look good. Reichert Hadding looks like he's back, people. He looks like he's back on the wing, full-fledged, with that scrum cap and his beard flowing. So it looks like he's back in form.
All right, well, let's name some Seattle Seawolves here on the team of the week. Scrum half, good to see his best performance of the year so far. JP Smith coming in with the 10-point performance here. His best performance of the season so far. He's coming off of an 8-point performance the week before. JP Smith obviously was the top tier 9 taken in fantasy MLR in a majority sense. He now has 23.1 fantasy points on the season, so he's working his way back up, and he looked good. And a lot of that was that try, but that's what you're looking for. You're looking for his distribution, but then also him being able to target and snipe those opportunities, which he did against the Chicago Hounds.
Yep, that's exactly all you need from JP Smith. You also love to get a little bit of cheeky little tackling from him, but yeah, that's all you need from him, and it's glad to see him finally do it in week 5.
Mac Mason, our fly half team of the week honoree, 20.9 fantasy points there, adding a try on top of that. Matt, we came up with the name of this segment here. I should say our community came up with this name, particularly the Chicago Carnivores. Nick, one of our commissioners, our segment or our little thing that we got going here is going to be calling our Book It Bets. And you've said under 3 wins for Anthem. You said Reese McDonald is going to finish off as the top back three, which right now is looking a little bit questionable. But again, he's coming off of a bye. And I said that I think Jade Stigling actually is going to be one of the best backs of the year, which we'll get into. But here, I think another book at bets that I'm going to lay down here. Mac Mason is going to finish off as the best fly half in 2024. 20.9 fantasy points here, 3 conversion kicks, a penalty kick, a try, 48 meters gain, and 12 tackles. I mean, Mac Mason was once again electric, and just the amount that they're kicking, his consistency, obviously they're using him at 10. He's going to be the top fly half.
Nah, you know who's going to be the top fly half?
Who?
Oscar Collar.
Oh man, we'll get into that. Which is pretty sick, but we'll get into that.
No, that's literally top 3.
What?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Oscar Collar, top 3 fly half.
Oh, you're putting that as a book at bets?
Yeah, that's
All
my
right.
book at bets.
That's
We
your
can
book
get
at
into
bets.
that later, but I'm putting it in.
All right, you're putting it in.
Putting it in.
Sounds
But yeah,
good.
Mac Mason is sweet. There are some idiots out there that thought Sam Windsor would start over him, but he's
Matthew.
He is absolutely
Matthew.
electric. No, I didn't hear that. Next game.
No. We still got another team of the week honoree, Maddie. You can't skip over this.
Hey, you kept. I just wanted to move on from the fact that I did not call him.
Noah Brown. We got to get a Chicago Hound guy in there. Noah Brown. Talk about a guy that took advantage of the back three situation and getting the Chicago Hounds being able to finally distribute the ball outside. Noah Brown, 32.6 fantasy points in our performance of the week out of anybody. He's center eligible right now in his first start of the year. Starts at the back three position, 142 meters gain, 2 tries, and 13 tackles, and 2 breakdown steals. I mean, what a performance by Noah Brown.
Yeah, good performance. Found himself in the right positions. Played a pretty good game. They just couldn't stop talking about how fast he was apparently in the broadcast. But it'll be a tough one for him moving forward. He still got Dominguez out there. Trying to figure out why Augsburger wasn't out there, but
concussion, I believe.
So he's out 11 days
from the week before. He was pretty badly hurt.
So yep, nice check on me. But yeah, so we'll see. Depending on what Nate Augsburger's health is, I thought they said level 1 concussion in the broadcast, and level 1 means 11 days. But maybe I'm very wrong on that one and think mixing up with another player. But yeah, we'll see. His success will very much depend on 1, the Chicago backline, and 2, Nate Augsburger's health.
All right, a few more guys I just want to mention before we move on to the next game. Jade Stigling, 20.3 fantasy points. I said he's going to be the back three, top back three player, going to be the steal of the year there. He is now our number 1 fantasy player right now. I feel like we always have these guys that come out of nowhere. Last year was Joe Mono. This year is Jade Stigling. 88.1 fantasy points total in the season right now as our number 1 MLR player is pretty incredible with another 20.3 fantasy point performance. You can check out our 0 to 100 segment in our episode 100 that we did a while back that breaks down kind of guys that we did not expect coming, and Jade Stigling is definitely one of them. Matt, you mentioned it. Riekert Hadding coming in, another big performance coming off the injury after missing the week before. 15 fantasy points for him. Aina Fudi slotting himself back in that back three position, 14.5. And Mason Flesh doing well for the back row Chicago, 14.3 fantasy points for him with 47 meters gain, a try, and 12 tackles. So a couple Chicago guys and a handful of Seattle guys there that performed pretty well in this matchup with JP Smith, Mac Mason, and Noah Brown as your team of the week honorees from this game. All right, let's shift on over now to Anthem Rugby Carolina taking on Old Glory DC at home. Interesting one. 46-32 victory for Old Glory DC. First of all, I don't know why there's only 2 matches on Saturday and they timed them at the exact same time. I had 2 screens. I made myself another Rugby Network account. Hopefully the Rugby Network doesn't hear me and that I'm not over the device limit, but I was watching both games at the same time with 2 different accounts so that I could watch them both. But Old Glory DC here coming out on top. For me, and I'll let you break this down, Maddie, it got a little bit dicey at the beginning. It was messy for Old Glory DC. They come out of the victory, and I'm watching them, and I was like, there's a chance. There was a part of me at one point in that match where Anthem at the beginning was coming out pretty hot, and I thought Anthem might have a chance of taking away at the one. Obviously, when the subs come on, Old Glory DC kind of pulls through here, gets a few tries, but I mean, Anthem RC 0-5, but they showed signs of life here, and just not a team that's going to get bent over and beat every single time.
I mean, look, Old Glory DC, they had a really sloppy first half. They had a lot of handling errors. Um, and even in the second half pressure, it was still really messy. But they were better in the second for sure. I think honestly, Anthem should have deserved this win. Like I think Anthem is a team that we are seeing getting very good in terms of their development. They removed kind of the aimless kicking. Oscar Collar was doing a lot more. Honestly, I'm trying to think out of hand. I'm not sure how many kicks he actually had out of hand in comparison to the previous weeks, where they were just kicking aimlessly on first phase, not realizing that, hey, you guys can attack. Like, you guys are young. Yes, some big guys on the other team, but they can attack. And I think defensively, they look decent. This is my fantasy take here. I've been looking at a lot at centers that were playing the Anthem. It is no longer the centers. Where the weakness is for the Anthem on defense is the back three and on the wings. They will give you so much space and give wingers so much space on the outside because of poor defensive decision making. That happens constantly. And it is going to allow back threes who play the Anthem to get lots of points. Even though it may not mean a blowout, they're going to get a lot of meters gained, I think.
Yeah.
But the last thing I kind of want to say, a couple last things. 72 to 78th minute was watching. If you roll back to that replay on the Rugby Network, that is a perfect example of what the Anthem lineup or the Anthem offense kind of is. Complete disarray. They look good when they're good, but they get into the red zone. They have no clue what they're doing. They start at the 5-meter line and end up at the 22 and have no idea. Like they had no organization there. But this is looking pretty good for the U.S. for 2031, 2031. This is looking pretty good. This is a very good way to develop these players, put them up against some of the best, and just say, hey, get out there, because they have shown nothing but progress in the past 5 weeks. Yeah,
no, I completely agree. And coming away with the bonus point as well, with the 4 tries, I believe, which is
they did. They got that at the end at the final,
right. You're right.
Which is awesome.
Which is
I think Anthem could have if Damian Hoyland didn't make that one goal line interception, they would have won. And I don't even know why he passed it. Springer Waitokia literally could have just went in, and he would have scored. But yeah, it was awesome. By the way, as we move on to the fantasy performances, I mean, Damian Hoyland is a beast.
Well, so let's get into that part. I mean, we'll dish out some Team of the Week honorees here because there's a handful of them here to wrap up our Week 5 Team of the Week. But I think to your point about the weak point being the back 3 players, Maddie, I think there's always going to be a huge fantasy point performance when it comes to a back 3 player, at least one back 3 player against Anthem Rugby Carolina. It's just finding that player. And this week, it was John Rizzo. I mean, back 3 player, 21.9 fantasy points for Rizzo. Scores 2 tries, 103 meters gained. Electric performance. But you mentioned him, Matt. Not Team of the Week this week because of his teammate Rizzo. But Damian Hoyland, I mean, 15.1 fantasy points from the fullback position, 88 meters gained, 2 try assists. Hoyland looks solid there as well.
Hoyland looks very good,
Yeah, and then obviously with, again, we've been hammering at home this whole season so far is that you are hammering the set piece or defense that is playing against Anthem RC. And this week it was obviously Old Glory DC, and they showed up with 7 fantasy points. They're Team of the Week defense and set piece. But nonetheless, though, again, you mentioned how there was positive signs with this Anthem team. There are guys on there that are worthy of a Team of the Week honoree and some pretty notable performances overall. We'll talk about first of our second row Team of the Week player, Shneel Singh. 9.9 fantasy points. Not too bad. I mean, I think the big thing for us at second row position, we mentioned on the show before, is playing the full 80 minutes. And he did just that. His second start in a row, almost breaking that double-digit fantasy point barrier, which would have made it 2 double-digit fantasy point performances in a row. 44 meters gained, 2 try assists, and 5 tackles in this one. Shneel Singh could be a nice little streamer for you here moving forward. But I do want to mention some other Anthem guys' names because they're kind of being overshadowed here. You mentioned Oscar Collar, Matt, 18.6 fantasy points. You said you're going to think he's going to finish as a top 3 fly half in 2024. Just speak a little bit about Collar and how electric he's being, despite being on a team that's a little bit lackluster at points.
Yeah, I mean, look, he had a lot of the points. Well, not a lot, but like 7 of the points coming from meters gained. He's a guy who loves to attack the line. He takes the ball at the line. He's going to give you some meters. He's not going to get the 70 that he got last game every time because he did have that big line break around the fringes. But like he's solid, man. And they score points, which gives him the opportunity to score points because he's a pretty decent kicker as well. And he gives you offensive, kind of the offensive upside as well, a 10 position that, only has it in a handful of guys in the league.
Yeah, and almost double-digit fantasy point performance. He started every single match so far this season. His lowest is 9 fantasy points in week 3, but he's going.
I don't think he'll come off the field unless he's hurt.
Yeah. So, and again, in this past week, 3 conversions, 2 penalty kicks for his season high 18.6. A couple others, Tirangatira Waitokia, 18.4 fantasy points for him, 100 meters gained, a try as well. David Still did solid for the Anthem, 16.7 points from the center position. Matt, you and I, he was our one of our starts of the week, Facundo Gaddis. Obviously, you're picking the hooker that is going to be playing against the Anthem to take advantage of that set piece try performance, and Gaddis did that twice there this past week. And what really burned me too was the last minute start by Brady Daniel for 14.5 fantasy points here. It's replacing his brother Corey Daniel, who's a late scratch. Jason Robertson, 13.8 fantasy points, pretty solid. Jake Turnbull, 13.2 with that quick tap from the penalty from the 5. And Junior Gaffa from 12.3. Yeah, from the front row position, Jake Turnbull's another guy that we got to talk about because
he just keeps tapping the ball and going, and that's just gonna keep giving you opportunities for points. And they're gonna look to do more of that because their lineout isn't giving them much, and their maul is obviously not going to do anything. So they get a penalty in the middle of the field, not in the middle of the field, on the 5 meter line, close to the sideline. I mean, hey, why not just tap it and go? Yeah.
All right.
That's a lot of team of the week, guys. Holy crap.
Schneel Sang, second row team of the week. John Rizzo, back 3 team of the week. And Old Glory DC, your defense set piece team of the week.
Lots of points being scored here.
Yeah, lots of points being scored here. And we mentioned that in our social post. There was just a whole bunch of performances. Like this whole week, just with the number of points that were scored in the Slugfest that was week 5, there was just a lot of fantasy performances. And how a team like T. Lobin's team is getting 117.6 fantasy points in a single week on a BYE-MAGEDDON week. Just a lot of really high scoring games. One that was probably our lowest scoring game, though, is the one that we're going to talk about now. The San Diego Legion taking on the Miami Sharks in Miami, coming away with a tight one here, 22-21 with the game-winning try in about, I think, close to the 70th minute, the 68th minute. But Miami coming out to the huge start at the beginning there with, was it a 21-6 lead, 21-3 lead or something like that? They had 21 points up.
No, it was like 21-10.
Something like that, where they were ahead with San Diego, but San Diego pushes ahead
21-9.
Gotcha. San Diego now 4-1, third in the West here. Miami falling to 1-5. But I mean, Miami had it. It was close, and they fell just shy. It's optimistic if I'm a Miami fan, and with San Diego, I mean, San Diego just keeps getting these slugfest matches, and their defense just pulling through here at the time when it matters most. And obviously they have the players to score when they need it most. And San Diego, as the final appearance team in 2023, they're continuing to show with the 4-1 record now that they are another force to be reckoned with, doing it in a different way this year that Vandy and I spoke about last episode. But San Diego still solid.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is just a lesson again of that, like, San Diego don't start Boyer. Like, we've seen this in the past so many times. Like, I'm pretty sure we saw it with Houston as well, that they start Boyer one game and they lose the first half, bring on either Smith or Carlo Denison, and suddenly they're winning in the second half. Like, there's a reason why he got subbed off at half. There's a reason why Tupai was on the bench. So don't do that, because that'll get you into trouble. But I don't know. Should we be concerned with San Diego having these types of first halves? This is the second time that they've had to come back. They did the same thing against Dallas. And yeah, it wasn't their best lineup, but still.
I mean, for me, the thing with this Dallas or the San Diego team is they're just not winning in the same way that they
Yeah.
were winning last year. Last year, it was a very high-powered offense, having Richard Judd, like you've mentioned many times on the show, moving the ball
Mhm.
quickly and being able to do that and using those high-powered weapons. Obviously, they lost a couple pieces, including Richard Judd, who was kind of the focal point of operating that offense. This year, it seems like they're relying a lot more heavily on their defense, which I think is going to lend itself to games like that, where if your offense is just not clicking at the right time, you're going to find yourself in holes. But the good thing about that, when you have a good defense like that, is that it's going to keep you in the game. And comebacks like this are going to be possible because you have defenses that can step up like this.
Yeah.
So I think I'm not necessarily concerned about San Diego. I think it tells me that San Diego is definitely not as good as they were last year, but they're still finding ways to win, which is what good teams do. And that's what San Diego is right now to me.
This is true. And on the Miami side, I mean, I think they looked a little bit more organized on offense, which is good. I think you saw that with the try that they scored. I love to see the fact that Nick Grigg is looking like Nick Grigg the fridge, that I thought he would be in the past couple games. So yeah, pretty nice game from him.
All right, couple performances that we're going to highlight here. No team of the week honorees, but they were close. I mean, again, double-digit fantasy point performances all over. Philippe Echeverry. He's another guy that's just been incredible form. 22.1 fantasy points. Obviously, that game against the Anthem, so his points were a little bit inflated in this game, but he backed it up against a San Diego team that is pretty stout defensively. 17.4 fantasy points, 72 meters gained. He adds the try. I do think there is a theme going here, Matt, where maybe it is a play to have the kicker who is playing against San Diego Legion as a potential high-flying start, just because they're so good defensively. I think a lot of teams are going to want to capitalize on points and will side to go with the 3 points instead of trying to score those tries at times, especially when games are really close. So maybe that is a play moving forward, is trying to find the kicker who's facing San Diego Legion. Obviously, there's a lot of context there, being on a good team that can at least keep up with San Diego. But hey, Miami showed it this past week that they did that. So Philippe Echeverry taking advantage of 17.4. A couple others, Thomas Inciarte, center for Miami, 14.5 points. Ethan Grayson, played at 9. Thomas Inciarte, even though he has played at the center position before, which isn't. Have you ever seen that before, Maddie?
We'll get into it in Waiver-Wire.
A center scrum half split guy. Ethan Grayson is a guy that you said as a pickup a while back on the waiver wire. He appears in the starting lineup now 3 weeks in a row. His second double-digit fantasy point performance, 14.1 with 71 meters gain and a try. And then you mentioned Nick Grigg, Matt, 12 fantasy points for him, looking like Nick Grigg the fridge, like you mentioned.
Yes, sir. Looking good. So we hope to see that Miami offense continue, because I think they can get to a very good spot. They got over the Anthem hump.
Yep.
If they can keep improving, they will not lose to the Anthem, and they'll be good.
All right,
No Glory DC will just lose to them the next time they play.
We'll see. All right. Let's now whip through here our waiver wire watch list. And Maddie, just a couple names I want to throw at you, because obviously this one's going to be an interesting waiver wire. Is just obviously we're coming on BYE-MAGEDDON. So I think my first tip to people is there are people who got dropped. Look at your waiver wire, that there are going to be guys that should not be on your waiver wire that are on your waiver wire. And those are guys that we're probably not going to talk about here just because they're obviously widely owned. But there are people who are in desperate spots who needed that start. Obviously, Vandy mentioned it last week. If you have to make a decision before keeping a guy, dropping a guy, BYE-MAGEDDON is going to come. Sometimes you just got to bite the bullet. But there's some people did make that decision to drop a guy. So make sure you're checking your waiver wire to see if anyone who shouldn't be there is available for you to put a bid on. But a couple guys that I want to put on the list of guys that may be potential drops for you, moving forward, just to make room for any of these guys that we're going to talk about on our waiver wire. First name I'm going to put out there is Tony Pulu. Are you dropping Tony Pulu, back 3 player? Didn't start once again this week, came off the bench, did score a try, but it obviously looks like Stigling is obviously a staple of the offense. Aina Foodie seems to be now racking up a couple starts in a row. Are you concerned about Tony Pulu, and what are you doing with them moving forward?
No, I'm not dropping him yet. Yes, he came on early in this game, because Duncan Matthews got hurt very early as well. I know that Pulu did get his knee wrapped up. He scored after he got his knee wrapped up, to be fair. I would hold on to him. It's too early to tell, I think. I think we saw the best Seattle when both Pulu and Seitling were on.
Okay, Marcel Bracchi, San Diego Legion guy. He loses his center eligibility. He's now a back three player. He's played back three times in a row, coming off of his third lowest performance this past week at 8.1. Is coming off 16.4 and 12.6. Are you holding on to Marcel Bracchi? What are you doing with him?
That's a tough one. I mean, you look at some of those back three numbers though, and you think, like, I would take that. You know,
It's
like
true.
there's some guys, like you look at even guys like Duncan Matthews, you look at guys like Paula Balakena, even like some of these top guys that Marcel Bracchi has been doing better than them. And playing more consistently, whether that's at 15 or whether that's at the centers, like he's playing more consistently. I think you're going to see him more in the back three. I think Ethan Grayson has kind of solidified that spot at 13. But yeah, I would hold on to him.
I'll go on to his teammate now. Just a couple more here. Mikey Teo. What are you doing with Mikey Teo? He had high draft capital coming into this. They've been moving it around that line, and it's been.
I would love to ask Vandy.
Yeah, I would love to ask Vandy too. But he's started every single match except for round 3. Has not broken the double-digit fantasy point performance as of yet. His highest meters gained is at 67 meters in week 2. Hasn't scored a try yet this season. What are you doing with Mikey Teo?
Look, if you drafted him early, I think you got to hold on. It is what it is. There's back three guys that have been doing worse for sure. Again, I'm gonna name the same names like Duncan Matthews, Paula Balakena. These guys haven't even played hardly. So there's definitely guys that are worse. If you drafted him in the 3rd round like Vandy did over Andrew Coe, then you should probably hold on to him. If you somehow got to him late, drop him. Go ahead and drop them. Shouldn't be an issue.
Johan Mumson, Houston second rower. He has played 80 minutes in basically almost every single match except for 2 so far. Has not broken higher than 8.2 this season. He is at that second row position though. What are you doing with Johan Mumson?
I'm keeping him. Don't touch him. You stick him in your second row spot and you leave him right there until he's on bye, which is next week. But you leave him right there.
Last question, Nick Suchon. He's probably been one of the disappointing front rowers of this season so far. Only 16 fantasy points this year. Did not start in round 4. He is going up against the Anthem, though, this upcoming week. What are you doing with Nick Suchon?
Well, you're definitely keeping him at least for this week. But I don't know. It's tough. Like, we haven't seen anybody else from this Utah front row or the hooker position that has shown that they can come on and do better. Suchon is still playing the 60 to 65, 70 minutes that he usually does. But maybe I'm wrong there. But he's playing minutes still. It's just he's still starting. So he's doing something right. He's going to keep getting playing time. He's going to get his opportunity at some point.
All right. Well, let's get into now kind of our waiver wire guys that you would maybe pick up for any of those guys we mentioned. Let's start off with the top, Matt. Front row position, Cameron Orr is my waiver wire pickup this week. I think he's your waiver wire pickup this week as well. 29.7 fantasy points for Cameron Orr. I mean, just doing great. I mean, he was my waiver wire pickup last week. He started every single match. He scored a high 8.6. He's playing around 70 minutes per match. Cameron Orr is a solid candidate for you to stream at the front row position.
Yep, 100% agreed there. I think for me, you look at the stats and you say, hey, he hasn't even scored a try, and he's scoring over essentially 5 points every match, which is, I think for me, lovely to see at the front row position. You'll take that every week.
You dropping Nick Suchon for Cameron Orr?
Not this week.
Not this week. Okay. If Nick Suchon puts up a dud against Anthem,
yeah, you're dropping him.
You're dropping him. Okay.
I mean, if Cameron Orr is available and you see Suchon is not in the lineup, you can drop Suchon.
Yeah. Okay. How much fab you putting down on Orr? I'm saying a couple bucks. Front row position, not very valuable.
Maybe. I mean, depends how desperate you are, but I'm going to say I would actually drop 5 or 6.
Okay.
Just because of, at least from our view, right, the front row position is quite thin.
Yeah. All right. Second row position for me. I have Shneel Singh down here. First start against Carolina. He did quite well. In his first start with 9 point, or excuse me, let me just pull this up here. With 9.9 fantasy points. Yeah, I was right there. In his second start of the year, he's starting to get consistent starts. The big thing for me with Sneal Singh is that he's a back row player, right? And if you can find a guy that at least one more week, especially, you might be able to capitalize on that. We'll see where he lines up in the lineup this coming week. I would imagine if he's in the starting lineup, it's back row, so you'll have 1 week at least for him being a back row player at your second row position. I think he's a good streaming option this week. If I'm a guy that owns any of the San Diego second row players or any of the Houston SaberCats second row players, Sneal Singh is a good player to kind of plug and play this coming week if he's at that back row position.
Yeah, and I had one of those guys that you talked about that you had to watch out for in your league to see if somebody might have dropped him, and that's going to be Frank Lockcore. They're playing Anthem, like you said, Rye, and he's shown that he's can be quite lethal offensively. So I think if he is in your waiver wire, you pick him up.
And who's the dum-dum that dropped him? That would be me in our league, at least. So I had to pick up my streaming start of the week in Justin Basson. So we'll see whether or not Frank Lockcore can find his way right back onto my lineup. We'll see whether or not. Hint, hint. All right, moving on to the back row position for me, and we have the same guy here. Colin Gross is my pickup of the week for the back row position. This is a guy that is probably the biggest benefactor of Jama being out, Fanana Schultz here. He was on my top list when it came to back row or second row players because he had second row eligibility last year. But I mean, 11.3 fantasy points coming off back-to-back double-digit fantasy points here, playing the full 80 minutes, has an 18 tackle performance in round 5, 22 tackles in the round before. Colin Gross seems to be the guy that's basically the guy that's filling in for the Jama position.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can feel that, the next 3 weeks, he should be at least in the lineup, you hope. But really is going to be up to those. The only risk is that you're going to be kind of subject to the lineup release, which is never a fun feeling. But we have seen Colin Gross. I thought he looked really good in the last game, not just as a back row, but as, an offensive fantasy player.
Yep. All right. Moving on to the scrum half position. Again, not much to talk about here. I mean, for me, I'm just kind of throwing a name at this point because the scrum half position is so shallow and all the nines that are relevant fantasy wise are probably taken in your league. So you're just kind of taking a flyer.
Well, there's some idiots in our league, Ryan.
Yeah. Well, for me, I'm picking up, before we get to your guy, Matt, Connor McManus. This is the second straight week where he started over COC9. I'm not too sure if there's anything there, but if you're in need of a 9, it's worth taking the shot of picking McManus up. He has only 2.4 fantasy points on the season so far, but starting 9 is better than no 9. And if you have the space on your roster because you're dealing with 9 troubles, take the shot on Connor McManus, pick him up in the waiver wires, see when the lineup comes up. If he's not starting this week, I drop him for a guy that is more valuable on your free agency. But at least until that lineup comes out, I'm picking up McManus.
Yeah, and this one was a tough one for me. I was trying to balance on what would be on the usual league's free agencies, but there is on ours Kieran McLeay, Zion Going, John Poland. I don't know who dropped John Poland. That was probably one of the dumbest drops. I don't know if you've got news that he's out for the season.
He's out for the season.
Not a dumb drop. Good job. Way to go.
So I guess then you can say that your other lineup could potentially be, or pickup of the week could be the guy that I picked up, which if you're looking to him, but the chance that he was probably picked up because you mentioned him, Matt, in that week because he was starting.
Yeah, because I'm a fortune teller.
Was Cam Nordley-Kelemeti, who
I'm a fortune teller. They didn't even come out with the lineup yet. And I already said, look, John Poland's out.
That's true.
He's out for a while. You better get on this guy in the waiver wire. And
true.
Ryan, you listen to me, I guess.
I listen to you.
But I would go Kieran McLeay for me. I think Kieran McLeay should be the starting 9 in Utah. Vandy said, what? After I said that last episode 2 weeks ago, and then Utah went out and absolute stomped them with Kieran McLeay starting. So again, I'm a fortune teller with these 9 positions. Just trust me.
All right. You picking up McLeay or Cam Nordley-Kelemeti if they're both available?
Cam Nordley-Kelemeti.
Right.
I am getting every piece of that New England Free Jug offense, especially at the 9 position.
All right, fly half position. There's nothing here for you. They're probably taken out. I wrote Reese Botha because
I think this is.
If he's available, you kind of take the shot on it. Rodney Iona's coming off of a big game. They're coming off bye, but you never know what they're going to do there. So just pick him up.
Yeah,
see where the lineup comes up.
The other one you can look at is Robbie Povey. Do they play Joel Hodgson? How much do they play Joel Hodgson?
Yep.
We saw, Robertson coming off at half basically. So yeah, that might be an interesting pickup as well.
All right, center position. I'm going with Junior Gaffa. 12.3 fantasy points for him on the season so far. But I will say, 22.3 fantasy points, 12.3. When he starts, that's I think the biggest question for Junior Gaffa is when he performs. He's had every performance that he started in has double-digit fantasy points. Last started in round 1, starts again in round 5. If he's available, I would pick him up because he might have been dealing with knock troubles during that time. Junior Gaffa probably is a guy that could be fantasy relevant for you.
Yeah, I am. I'm gonna go on a cheeky little route here. So we talked about if you want to pick up for 2 positions, all right, there's a chance Thomas Inciarte plays scrum half, starts at scrum half this weekend. Okay. He does that. That's 3 starts in a row. He picks up scrum half eligibility. He then moves back to the centers because Kubeli is obviously going to start over him. Right. And all of a sudden, you have a center, a guy who's starting at center, starting in your scrum half position. I'm picking up Thomas Inciarte with my center position pickup, knowing that that's a long game. In 2 weeks, whoever I'm playing in 2 weeks, you're going down.
That's some 3D chess there, Matty. That's the type of thinking that gets your name onto the Fantasy Ruckers Championship jersey, which you finally have on I'd like to mention on our jersey now.
Yeah, that's not my handwriting, people. It's fraud. But no, I think it's honestly me trying to just get back to having Nate Oxberger at 9. But no, this is good. I like this. This is good for me. I think Inciarte might be a nice little pickup. If you don't need anybody urgent, have a play at this one. You got somebody to drop. Yeah. Why not? See what happens. It could end up in your favor, and suddenly you're at your 9 position scoring 7 to 15 points for 3 weeks straight.
The advantage,
and you would get that for 3 weeks straight.
Right. The advantage that you would have having a center playing at your scrum
Imagine
half
he
position.
Just kept flopping after push back, center scrum half, center scrum half.
That'd be pretty crazy. I mean, it just goes to show you in fantasy MLR there is that next level of an analysis and just eligibility. Yeah. I know it plays a part in other fantasy sports, more so I'd say baseball than any other sport, not really in football that we see, but in fantasy MLR, I mean, something like that and taking advantage of that is it's huge.
Yeah, that is like QB that is moving. That's like tight end eligible.
Right, exactly. Well, so I guess the part of that would have been what's it called? Your favorite player in fantasy football.
Or like a QB that is defensive special team eligible.
But like that's like what's his name on the Saints?
Taysom
Hill. When he was playing quarterback at tight end position.
For this one, Inciarte, people, don't drop too much fab on it. If you got something to burn it. Don't take his last game too much account. Kubeli, I'm sure, will be back. Just a matter of when.
I will say though, like start using.
And by the way, he didn't do anything when he played center. So he was under 10 points every time. He even got negative one time.
But the opportunity though is there.
Exactly.
A guy playing center at 9.
The opportunity, the fact that you could have a center who's starting and being in a 9 position where people struggle to find.
It's huge.
Points.
And I will say, as we get to the last back 3 position, just like, hey, don't be afraid to use that fab. If you want to take a shot,
it too much.
Take a shot. Well, I mean, there's some people that have been holding on to it. I mean, we're about a little less than a third way into the season. You need to use your cash. You don't want to be sitting at the end of the year still having
$30 on a guy I dropped the next week.
It's true. I've done that too. All right. Last guy that I'm going to put on this list is John Rizzo, for me, at least from the back 3 position as a starter. He scores his high 21.9 fantasy points. Obviously, that's a little bit inflated against Anthem, but I mean 8.1, 8.8 in rounds 4 and rounds 2. Gets the meters gain, has the ability to score the try. He's only not started 1 week. John Rizzo might be a guy you just throw a flyer on, and he might pay off for you here for Oklahoma DC.
Yep, I don't mind that. I'm going with Isaiah Crusay. Was looking at some of the back 3 for Utah because they are playing the Anthem. And I thought about explosive guys. I thought Jesse Hamilton. I thought Isaiah Crusay. Noah Bain. But I think Isaiah Crusay is going to be your nice little bet there on the wing and hopefully put up some points and be a nice little waiver pickup for you.
All right, and defense set piece punt that position. You don't have one at this point. I mean, maybe. I mean, might throw it
if
on.
Somebody dropped it, and our waiver wire people have dropped it for sure. There is three teams out there: Old Glory DC, Anthem, and Miami Sharks. And I would definitely pick up Old Glory DC.
Like, I mean, why were they not picked up? Which is crazy in our league against the Anthem, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah.
But
Actually,
again,
that is pretty crazy.
also,
Who the heck had him?
I will say though as well, take a look at any of the teams that were on buys. I can't imagine like New England or NOLA maybe were dropped. They could have been dropped, but I don't think New England would drop. But check if Utah, LA, NOLA, any of those guys would drop. Maybe you can find there. I will say I'll throw Anthem in there. I think there shouldn't be a defense that's you wouldn't throw them in there just to have if you have no defense. If you have a team on bye and you have an opportunity, I mean, I wouldn't.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, yeah, you can put them in there. They always have a chance to get the defensive bonus point. They always have a chance to they only have chances to get defensive bonus point. So you get 1 point a week. Yeah, I guess that every point matters. Every point, 1 point matters.
Well, we had our first tie ever in fantasy MLR in one of our leagues. So I mean that just goes to show you that every single point matters. But all right, let's shift on now over to our week 6 preview. We'll crush this. I know this episode is getting a little bit long here, but we'll fly through these. 22-5-1 myself. We all went perfect last week, which I think it was probably the easiest week to predict this past week. I got a little bit sweaty there though with that Miami San Diego game. We said it last episode. If there was an upset that was happening, it was probably going to be that game, and it looked like that. Also, Old Glory DC kind of scared me a little bit as well. Matt, you're ahead in overall, though, 23-4-1, just ahead of me by a win, ahead of Vandy by 4 wins, who's 19-8-1. On bye this week, the Houston SaberCats, San Diego Legion. So if you have any of those guys, make sure they're out of your lineup and you start looking at some of those waiver wire guys that we had mentioned a little bit earlier. But let's get into the first matchup on the Friday. We got 2 matchups on Friday. 9 o'clock Eastern time, the Utah Warriors taking on Anthem Rugby Carolina. I'm hammering my Utah Warriors players. Joel Hodgson is a must start for me. Nick Suchon, this is the make right game. I have him. I will be starting him this week to see whether or not he can capitalize on the opportunity if he is starting. Matthew Isaiah Cruze, I think if he's starting is a great play, and we'll see who starts in that center line. Any of those guys, Paul Lasike. We'll see if Will Leonard is maybe in there, or sorry, not Will Leonard. He's on LA. Paul Lasike is in there. Yeah, we'll see. Kieran McLeay, even a good play there. All the Utah Warriors guys.
Yeah, I'm gonna say one guy, Michael Manson. If he's in the lineup, you hammer him home.
And I mean, Oscar Collar is a solid start again. I'm always going to be a little bit suspicious on any fantasy valuable guys on Anthem. I will say the only guy that I'm really confident in every single week is going to be Oscar Collar, and I expect him to do another good week here and live up to Matthew's top 3 fly half finish. I'm going Utah in this one, though.
Yep, I'll match you.
All right, NOLA Gold taking on the Chicago Hounds at home, Seattle Seawolves getting ahead of myself. Seattle Seawolves taking on the Dallas Jackals at home on Friday, 10:30 Eastern time, late kickoff here. Seattle Seawolves 4-1 taking on the 2-3 Dallas Jackals. This one should be an interesting one. Again, I think I'm confident with all my Seattle Seawolves players. We'll see where the Dallas Jackals can get back and right their ship. 2-3. We'll see if they can do it. They've looked optimistic. They've fallen a little bit here, but they've had some tough competition, though. But I think Seattle's going to be winning this one, though, obviously.
Yeah, I look for big games from the Seattle forwards, and I think the center position as well might have a big game. I think Seattle's going to win this on home turf in their home time zone.
And just as a spoiler to my starts of the week are going to be between Nick Suchon and Joe Taffetti based on what the lineups come out. So that will be mine. Matt, you're taking Seattle in this one, I assume?
Yep.
All right, moving on to our first Saturday matchup. The NOLA Gold taking on the Chicago Hounds. NOLA coming off of bye 3-1, taking on the Chicago Hounds 1-3-1. Obviously, the storyline here is what does that Chicago backline look like? If Meeks is at center, starting him. If he's at fly half again, a little bit more questionable. NOLA, that backline is looking electric, living up to that standard now that Matthew has predicted over the past 2 seasons. I'm going NOLA Gold in this one.
Yep, going NOLA Gold for sure. And yeah, it should be a good game. Should be interesting.
Any names you'd list out here from Fantasy Performance you're excited for?
I think Jordan Jackson Hope will probably have another big game. I think Ed Fido is set up for a pretty big game.
I made the mistake of not playing Ed Fido in his debut, and I know he was one of your starts of the week. I'm not making that mistake again.
Yeah, you should always listen to my starts. But yeah, outside of that, I mean, those are the guys that I've been really thinking of. And I guess maybe, I mean, you got to throw the big man, Billy Meeks.
Absolutely. You're going NOLA in this one, I assume.
I'm going NOLA.
All right.
Always.
All right. New England Free Jacks taking on the Miami Sharks at home. 3-1 New England, 1-5 Miami. I think New England's going to eat up Miami in this one. I'm confident in Philippe Echeverry. Outside of that, not so much confident in any other of the fantasy assets on Miami's side, but New England, I'm excited to play any New England Free Jack coming off of a bye. Very happy to just plug and play those guys in my lineup.
Yep, I'm assuming LaRue Milan is back.
I hope
see
so.
If he's in there.
We'll
see if he's in there. This is kind of a tough one to me.
It's tough?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look for a big game from Potros, I think.
You think Miami has a shot here?
Yes. I mean, look, John Poland's out.
That's true. That's true.
I get it. The team's very good. Oh, look for a big game from Ben Lesage as well. I get it. The New England team's very good. I think it's early in the year. We've seen this before from the New England team. I think Miami could very easily come in here as a team that's looking a lot better, could come in and really upset some home fans and upset all those Rangers up there. So yeah, I'm gonna go Miami. And
Damn.
I think Echeverry's gonna have a really great game off the boot. I think Nick Gregg is gonna have a really good game. And I also think Ben Bonasso is gonna have a good game as well.
Okay.
And Sean McNulty. Kirby Myhill is going to start, but Sean McNulty is going to have the game.
He always seems like, even at that, we forgot to mention in that game breakdown, but was it? No, sorry, that was the San Diego game. Hugh Roach. Do you see that run by Hugh Roach catching on that kick? I mean, incredible.
All
right, last game of the weekend, Old Glory DC taking on Los Angeles at home. Old Glory DC 2-1 off of their big time win against the Anthem.
Yeah.
Los Angeles coming off the bye 1-3. This one has me a little bit worried here because obviously Old Glory DC, they got the win that they were supposed to get against Anthem, but it just wasn't as convincing as I'd like it to be.
Yeah.
I'm excited for obviously your big names on Los Angeles like Ko and guys like that. So we'll see from that end what happens there. But Old Glory DC, a little bit iffy on there. And again, none of those guys have really popped off for me outside of that performance against Anthem because of how many points they scored. So fantasy wise, it's a tough decision. I'm not as confident in my Old Glory DC players as I'd like to be. You know, like I have Lataro Bavaro. I'm excited about that. You know, I'm not as excited as I'd like to be. Jason Robertson, if you're that owner, you know, he's done okay for you. Just no pop out performances.
Yeah, I gotta agree. I think RCLA is going to take this one.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I guess have it at that. You know, I don't think that means that it's going to be bad games from all the Old Glory DC players. I think Axel Muller, Damian Hoyland, even John Rizzo, I think has a chance. It's honestly going to be whoever is on the side of the field that Ko is not on. Because yeah, I mean they're going to have a size advantage over whatever winger's playing for RFCLA. So yeah, I have RFCLA winning this one.
I have RFCLA winning as well. Last question before we wrap up the show, Maddie. Moving forward on the Old Glory DC side of things, what back three player are you most confident in? Damian Hoyland or Axel Muller?
Axel Muller.
Over Damian Hoyland, really?
Axel Muller is like, he's in their offense every chance, every set piece, every back play, they have him working across the field and being the guy that will take the ball in. So yeah, Axel Muller for sure.
All right. Well, let's wrap up this episode here. Again, you guys made it. If you're listening and watching our show here, we made it through BYE-MAGEDDON. Made it through our first BYE-MAGEDDON. We got through it together. Now we got an exciting slate of matches. Only 2 teams on bye this week, so it should be exciting. Plug and play those guys. Hey, final thing before we wrap up the show. Shout out to Dan again, Vandy's grandpa. Obviously, all the best wishes to him and Vandy and his family as they go through a challenging time. But yay, as the Fantasy Ruckers community, we stand together here, and we are always rooting for one of each other and wishing all the best. So hey. give him a little shout out in the community as well. I know Vandy would definitely appreciate that. Give a shout out to Dan as well, because he is a now avid viewer of the Fantasy Ruckers show, which is good to see. All right, well, hey, thank you again to all of our listeners and viewers. Like, subscribe down below on the YouTube video page. Subscribe on the wherever you get podcasts, and yeah, thank you for all the support and tuning in. And Maddie, yeah, good to have you back. Good to have you back.
Nice to be back, and hopefully we get Vandy back in the coming week. So yeah, let's go, Vandy. You still stink, though.
All right. And we'll see you next week on another episode of the Fantasy Ruckers Show.
Miss you, Vandy.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.